In the gleaming high-rise district of Mumbai, where wealth and poverty danced an uncomfortable tango, lived Raj Malhotra, a self-made millionaire who had built his fortune in real estate development. His penthouse office, perched on the 40th floor, offered a panoramic view of the city he had helped shape, but it couldn't show him the consequences of his actions that would unfold in the years to come. At 42, Raj had everything money could buy: designer suits, luxury cars, and a black American Express card that seemed to have no limit. His success story was featured in business magazines, and young entrepreneurs looked up to him as a role model. But behind the carefully crafted public image lay a man who had grown increasingly disconnected from his humble beginnings. 20 years ago, he had started as a small-time property dealer, working from a tiny office in the suburbs. Those days, he would spend hours with clients, sharing cups of chai and building genuine connections. But success had a way of changing people, and Raj was no exception. The warm smile that once came naturally to his face had been replaced by a practiced business expression. Among his household staff was Priya, a young woman from a small village in Bihar. She had come to Mumbai with dreams of supporting her family back home. Like many others before her, she found work as a domestic helper, and through a placement agency, landed a job at Raj's luxurious apartment. She was hardworking, honest, and carried herself with quiet dignity despite her circumstances. Priya's presence in the house was barely noticed by Raj, who was too busy with his empire building to pay attention to the people who kept his life running smoothly. She would silently dust his awards, arrange his newspapers, and prepare his morning tea exactly the way he liked it, strong, with just a hint of cardamom. But fate had other plans for both of them. One rainy evening, when Mumbai's streets were flooded as they often were during monsoon, Raj found himself stranded at home instead of attending a crucial business dinner. The power was out, and in the strange intimacy created by candlelight, he actually noticed Priya for the first time. She was not just efficient but also educated, having completed her bachelor's degree through distance learning while working. Their conversation that evening flowed naturally, touching upon their similar small-town backgrounds and shared values. Over the next few months, their interactions grew more frequent. Raj found himself looking forward to their morning conversations over tea. Priya's genuine interest in his work and her insightful observations reminded him of his younger, more idealistic self. She never asked for anything, never tried to take advantage of their growing closeness. Perhaps that's what drew him to her even more. But their story took an unexpected turn when Priya discovered she was pregnant. When she gathered the courage to tell Raj, his reaction was nothing like she had expected. The man who had shared his dreams with her, who had listened to her stories with such attention, suddenly became a stranger. His eyes turned cold, and his words even colder. "This can't happen," he had said, pacing in his study. "Do you understand what this could do to my reputation? To my business?" He pulled out his checkbook, hands trembling slightly. "I'll give you enough money to start a new life somewhere else. This has to disappear. You have to disappear." Priya stood there, her world crumbling around her, but her spine straight and her head held high. She didn't want his money, she had never wanted it. With tears in her eyes but strength in her voice, she said, "I don't need anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know." She walked out of his house that day, leaving behind not just a job, but also her faith in the man she thought she had known. Raj tried to convince himself he had done the right thing. He threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, making even bigger deals, building even taller buildings. But sometimes, in the quiet of night, when Mumbai's lights twinkled below his penthouse window, he would remember the warmth of those candlelit conversations, and something that felt suspiciously like regret would creep into his heart. Little did he know that his decision that day would set in motion a chain of events that would come back to shake the very foundation of his carefully constructed world. As he continued to climb the ladder of success, somewhere in the same city, a story was taking shape, one that would eventually force him to confront the man he had become. Life has a way of moving forward, regardless of the choices we make or the regrets we carry. For Priya, the next few months were a blur of quiet determination and silent tears. She found herself in a small one-room apartment in Thane, a suburb far from the glittering towers where she had once worked. The distance wasn't just physical, it represented everything she had left behind, including her shattered dreams and broken trust. But Priya wasn't alone in her journey. Her neighbor, an elderly retired schoolteacher named Anjali Auntie, became her unexpected guardian angel. When morning sickness kept Priya from her new job as a data entry operator, Anjali Auntie would bring her ginger tea and homemade khichdi. Beta, sometimes life's biggest challenges bring the greatest blessings, she would say, her wise eyes twinkling with compassion. Meanwhile, in his world of marble floors and corporate meetings, Raj continued his ascent to greater heights of success. He had just closed a deal to build a township on the outskirts of Mumbai, his biggest project yet. Business magazines dubbed him the king of real estate, and his face appeared on billboards across the city. But something had changed in him since that rainy evening. His assistant noticed how he would sometimes pause while passing the staff quarters in his building, his eyes lingering a moment too long on the domestic helpers going about their work. During client meetings, he found himself distracted by pregnant women, wondering about the life he had turned away from. These moments would pass quickly, buried under layers of spreadsheets and presentations, but they left tiny cracks in his carefully constructed facade. One evening, as monsoon clouds gathered over Mumbai once again, Raj found himself stuck in traffic near Thane. Through his car's tinted windows, he watched people hurrying home before the rain. A pregnant woman caught his eye. She was sharing her umbrella with an elderly lady, both laughing as they navigated the crowded street. For a moment, he thought he recognized Priya's smile, but before he could look again, his driver had found a gap in traffic and moved on. That night, sleep eluded him. He walked to his home office, where a wall of awards and certificates gleamed in the darkness. Achievement after achievement, recognition after recognition, yet something felt hollow. He opened his laptop and, for the first time in months, typed Priya's name into the search bar. But digital footprints are easy to lose in a city of millions, and her name yielded no results. Back in Thane, Priya's life was taking shape in unexpected ways. Her pregnancy had brought challenges, but it had also awakened a strength she didn't know she possessed. During her lunch breaks at work, she started taking online courses in financial management. "My child deserves a mother who never stops growing," she would tell Anjali Auntie, who would beam with pride. As her belly grew, so did her resolve. She transformed her tiny apartment into a home, filling it with second-hand books and small potted plants. On weekends, she would teach English to the building watchman's children, remembering how education had been her own ladder out of poverty. The money was tight, but she managed, never touching the check Raj had given her. It still lay unopened in a drawer, a reminder of everything she refused to be. 7 months into her pregnancy, life threw another curveball. While working late one evening, Priya noticed a discrepancy in the company's accounts she was entering. Her attention to detail had caught what appeared to be a significant fraud. When she reported it to her supervisor, she didn't expect it to reach the company's owner. But 2 days later, she was called to meet Mr. Kapoor, the CEO. "Your honesty has saved us millions," Mr. Kapoor said, studying her with kind eyes. "We need more people like you in our organization." He offered her a promotion to the compliance department, along with maternity benefits and flexible working hours. It wasn't just a job offer, it was validation of everything Priya believed in: integrity, hard work, and the courage to stand up for what's right. That evening, as she shared the news with Anjali Auntie over dinner, her baby kicked particularly hard, as if celebrating with them. "See? The universe has its own ways of bringing justice," Anjali Auntie said, serving another helping of her famous aloo paratha. "Your child is already bringing you luck." Unknown to both women, across the city, Raj was facing his own moment of truth. During a routine meeting, his new project's location was being discussed, a township in Thane, right where he had glimpsed that pregnant woman who reminded him of Priya. The coincidence felt like more than just chance. That night, he did something he had never done before. He opened his personal safe and took out the copy of Priya's employment records he had kept, despite ordering all traces of her to be erased. As rain pattered against his window, reminiscent of that fateful evening months ago, Raj began to understand that success built on buried truths was like a skyscraper with a weak foundation. It might reach impressive heights, but it would always be vulnerable to collapse. The question was, did he have the courage to face what he had buried? The next morning, Mumbai woke up to news that would set tongues wagging in boardrooms and tea stalls alike. Raj Malhotra, the real estate tycoon, had announced a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and their education. The press release mentioned no names, gave no specific reasons, but to one person reading it in her small Thane apartment, the message was clear as day. The morning Priya went into labor, Mumbai was bathed in golden sunshine. It was earlier than expected, 2 weeks before her due date. Anjali Auntie took charge immediately, calling a taxi and grabbing the hospital bag they had prepared together. As they rushed through the awakening streets, Priya clutched her neighbor's hand, both excited and terrified of what lay ahead. At the hospital, time seemed to move in slow motion. Between contractions, Priya's mind wandered to her family back in Bihar, who still didn't know about her pregnancy. She had told them she'd taken a corporate job that kept her too busy to visit. Every month, she still sent money home, never letting them suspect that their daughter's life had taken such an unexpected turn. Meanwhile, Raja's new foundation was making headlines. He had appointed a board of successful women entrepreneurs and social workers to run it, but insisted on personally reviewing every major decision. His staff noticed how he would spend hours reading applications from single mothers seeking educational support, something unprecedented for a man who usually delegated everything below board-level decisions. That morning, as Priya was bringing new life into the world, Raj was visiting a women's shelter supported by his foundation. The shelter's director, Mrs. Desai, was giving him a tour when a young resident approached them. "Sir, because of your foundation's support, I can finally complete my MBA," she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. Her words hit him harder than any business deal ever had. Back at the hospital, after 12 hours of labor, Priya's baby boy arrived with a powerful cry that echoed through the delivery room. As she held him for the first time, tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "Welcome to the world, Arjun." She had chosen the name months ago, Arjun, like the great warrior who stood for truth and justice in the Mahabharata. The baby had her eyes, but something about his smile reminded her of Raj. It was a bittersweet realization, but Priya had long since made peace with her circumstances. Looking at her son's innocent face, she made a silent promise: "You will grow up knowing that your worth isn't determined by anyone else's choices." Anjali Auntie, who had been pacing the hospital corridor for hours, burst into happy tears when she saw the baby. "He's perfect, absolutely perfect," she declared, immediately assuming the role of honorary grandmother. She had already prepared a list of traditional ceremonies they would need to perform for the baby's well-being. News of Arjun's birth spread quickly through their small community in Thane. The building watchman's children, whom Priya tutored, made colorful welcome cards. Her colleagues from the compliance department sent flowers and a handmade baby blanket. Mr. Kapoor himself called to congratulate her and extend her maternity leave by an extra month with full pay. But life had another surprise in store. During her hospital stay, Priya's room neighbor was a woman named Sunita, who worked as a senior administrator at one of Mumbai's top schools. They bonded over midnight feeding sessions and shared stories of their lives. When Sunita learned about Priya's background in financial compliance and her volunteer teaching experience, her eyes lit up. "Our school's trust is looking for someone to handle both administration and teaching basic accounting to senior students," Sunita explained. "The pay is good, and they provide daycare for staff children. Would you be interested?" It seemed too good to be true, a job that combined Priya's skills with her love for teaching, plus childcare for Arjun. As Priya was building her new life with Arjun, Raj's foundation work led him to unexpected places. During a foundation meeting, a social worker mentioned a successful program in Thane that helped single mothers return to work. Something about the location nagged at his conscience. That same evening, he asked his driver to take him there. The program operated from a modest building near the school where Priya had just interviewed. As Raj walked through the center, listening to success stories, his eyes fell on a wall of photographs, smiling mothers with their children, each face telling a story of resilience. He found himself searching these faces, looking for something, or someone, he wasn't ready to admit he was seeking. One of the program coordinators noticed his particular interest in the photos. "Sir, these are just a few of the thousands of women who raise their children alone in our city," she said. "Each one has a different story, but they all share the same strength." Her words made him think of that rainy evening that had changed everything. That night, unable to sleep, Raj did something he had avoided for months. He drove to his old apartment building. The security guard recognized him immediately, offering a respectful salaam. "Sir, you want to check the penthouse renovation?" he asked. But Raj's eyes were drawn to the staff quarters where Priya used to live. "The new maid, she's not like Priya, ma'am," the guard said casually, not realizing the impact of his words. Priya ma'am was different, always helping everyone, teaching the children after work. He kept talking, but Raj had stopped listening. For the first time, he was hearing about Priya from someone else's perspective, understanding the void her departure had left. As he drove back home that night, Mumbai's lights reflected off his car windows like countless stars. His driver took the route through Thane, passing by the school where, unknown to him, Priya had just accepted her new job. Life's threads were drawing tighter, weaving together a pattern that would soon become clear to everyone involved. In her small apartment, Priya sat in the darkness, cradling a sleeping Arjun. The city lights twinkled through her window too, but she saw them differently, as beacons of hope, promising a future bright with possibilities. She had no way of knowing that every decision, every step she and Raj had taken, was leading them toward an inevitable intersection of their paths. Time moved swiftly in Mumbai, like the local trains that never stopped rushing through the city. 6 months had passed since Arjun's birth, and autumn was settling over the city. Priya had settled into her new role at the school, earning respect from both colleagues and students. Her financial management classes had become unexpectedly popular, with students appreciating her practical approach to teaching. Little Arjun was thriving in the school's daycare center, his cheerful giggles becoming a familiar sound in the corridors. During lunch breaks, Priya would sit in the daycare garden, feeding him while chatting with other working mothers. These moments of shared experiences helped heal some of the deeper wounds she carried. One day, while teaching her senior class about corporate ethics, a student raised his hand. "Ma'am, have you heard about Raj Malhotra's latest project? He's building a free residential school for underprivileged children right here in Thane." The name sent a jolt through Priya's body, but years of self-discipline helped her maintain her composure. She steered the discussion toward the general concept of corporate social responsibility, all while her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. That evening, as she walked home with Arjun, she noticed the construction site in the distance. Huge hoardings displayed Raj's company logo and the project details. She had deliberately avoided reading news about him, but now his presence was literally casting a shadow over her neighborhood. Anjali Auntie, who was waiting at her apartment with hot pakoras, immediately sensed something was wrong. "Life has a strange way of bringing things full circle," the older woman said wisely, bouncing Arjun on her knee. "But remember, Beta, you're not the same person you were 2 years ago. You're stronger now." Priya nodded, watching her son play with the keys of her new laptop, a gift from her school for developing an innovative financial literacy program. Meanwhile, Raj's life had taken an unexpected turn. The foundation work, which had started as a way to ease his conscience, had gradually become his primary focus. His board members were surprised to find him personally visiting project sites, talking to beneficiaries, and suggesting improvements based on real needs rather than just publicity value. During one such visit to the Thane construction site, Raj noticed a school nearby. Something about its red brick building tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place it. His project manager mentioned that many of their workers' children attended that school, praising its innovative programs, particularly the financial literacy classes for underprivileged students. Intrigued, Raj decided to visit the school as part of his foundation's educational initiative. The principal was delighted to host him, proudly showing off their facilities and programs. As they walked through the corridors, Raj noticed photographs of various school events on the walls. He stopped abruptly in front of one. It showed a teacher helping a student with a project. Her face turned slightly away from the camera, but something about her posture was hauntingly familiar. "Ah, that's our newest faculty member," the principal said proudly. "She's revolutionized our approach to financial education. The students absolutely adore her." Before Raj could ask her name, they were interrupted by a group of board members arriving for a meeting. That same afternoon, Priya was working late in her classroom, preparing for the next day's lessons. Arjun was asleep in his stroller beside her desk, his small hands clutching his favorite toy, a stuffed elephant Anjali auntie had given him. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, reminiscent of another evening long ago. Suddenly, she heard footsteps in the corridor. The principal's voice drifted in, accompanied by others, probably showing visitors around. Priya didn't pay much attention until she heard a voice that made her freeze, a voice she had tried so hard to forget. She quickly gathered her things, gently lifted Arjun, and slipped out through the other door. In her haste to leave, she dropped Arjun's vaccination record book. A parent-teacher meeting was scheduled for the next day, and she had been carrying it to update the school records about his recent vaccinations. The book fell open, revealing Arjun's full name and date of birth. Minutes later, Raj entered the now empty classroom. The principal was explaining about the financial literacy program, but Raj's attention was caught by something on the floor. He picked up the small blue booklet, intending to leave it at the teacher's desk. But as he read the name on it, the world seemed to stop spinning. The child's date of birth, when counted back, aligned perfectly with that rainy evening that had changed everything. The mother's name was listed simply as Priya, but it was enough. All the pieces suddenly fell into place: the familiar photographs, the financial program, the location in Thane. Outside, Priya hurried home through the gathering dusk, holding Arjun close. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, Raj was standing in her classroom, holding a piece of paper that would shatter his carefully reconstructed world. The truth he had tried to bury was about to surface, bringing with it a storm that would shake both their lives to the core. As Mumbai's evening traffic honked and bustled below, two people in different parts of Thane stood frozen in their own moments of realization. Priya, safe in her apartment but knowing her carefully built new life might be about to change, and Raj, still in the empty classroom, holding a document that proved he had a 6-month-old son. The next morning's parent-teacher meetings loomed ahead, and for the first time in months, both Priya and Raj found themselves dreading the sunrise. Life had brought them full circle, back to the same city, the same neighborhood, and soon, the same room. The question wasn't if they would meet, but how this meeting would change everything they had built in their time apart. The morning of the parent-teacher meetings dawned with unusual clarity for Mumbai. The smog that typically blanketed the city had lifted, as if nature itself was preparing for the momentous day ahead. Priya arrived early at school, her heart thundering in her chest. She had spent the night alternating between pacing her small apartment and watching Arjun sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing around him. Anjali auntie had offered to watch Arjun for the day, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Whatever comes, face it with dignity," she had said, hugging Priya goodbye. "You've done nothing wrong. Those words echoed in Priya's mind as she arranged her classroom for the meetings. Across town, Raj sat in his car, the vaccination booklet lying heavy in his briefcase. He had barely slept, spending the night looking at old photographs from his company events, searching for glimpses of Priya in the background, wondering how he had been so blind to what truly mattered. His driver noticed his unusual silence but knew better than to comment. The parent-teacher meetings were scheduled to start at 9 a.m. Priya's first few appointments went by in a blur, discussing students' progress, their grades, their potential. But her eyes kept darting to the clock, knowing that sooner or later, her past would walk through that door. At 11:30 a.m., during a brief break between meetings, Priya heard familiar footsteps in the corridor. Her hands trembled as she straightened the papers on her desk, drawing strength from the life she had built for herself and her son. When the door opened, time seemed to stand still. Raj stood in the doorway, looking both powerful and uncertain, a combination she had never seen in him before. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, but his usual confident posture was replaced by something more hesitant. In his hands, he held the blue vaccination booklet like it was made of glass. "The principal told me you were teaching here," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. "But I didn't believe. I couldn't imagine." His voice trailed off as he took in the classroom, the walls covered with students' financial projects, the small family photo on her desk showing her with baby Arjun. Priya stood up, her spine straight, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Please, sit down," she said, gesturing to the chair meant for parents. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. "I assume you have questions." Raj sat down slowly, placing the vaccination booklet on her desk. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About him, about where you were?" A sad smile crossed Priya's face. "Tell you?" she replied, her voice calm but firm. "You made it very clear that you wanted no part of this. You offered money to make us disappear, remember?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. "I was wrong," Raj said, running his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their past. "I was so wrong, Priya. I've spent the last year trying to make up for it through the foundation, but seeing this." He touched the vaccination booklet gently, seeing his name, his date of birth, knowing I have a son. "His name is Arjun," Priya said softly. "He's 6 months old. He started crawling last week. He loves the sound of rainfall and giggles every time he sees pigeons on the windowsill." She paused, watching emotions play across Raja's face. "He has your smile." Tears welled up in Raja's eyes, something Priya had never seen before. Can I meet him?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. The powerful businessman was gone, replaced by a man confronting the magnitude of what he had missed. Priya took a deep breath. "That's not a simple request, Raj. Arjun has a stable life, filled with love and security. I've worked hard to give him that. I can't let anything disrupt his happiness." She looked directly into his eyes. "What are your intentions? Really?" Raj stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the school playground where children were running around during their break. "I've changed, Priya," he said quietly. "The foundation, it started as guilt, yes, but it became something more. Working with single mothers, seeing their struggles and strength, it made me understand what I had done to you." He turned back to face her. "I'm not asking to disrupt your lives. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Not just with money or support, but with time, presence, responsibility." He pulled out his phone and showed her his calendar. "I've cancelled all my international trips for the next 3 months. The foundation work is my priority now." Priya listened carefully, years of observing people helping her read between the lines. She could see genuine remorse in his eyes, but also something else, fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being too late, fear of not deserving a second chance. "We need to take this slowly," she finally said. "Very slowly. Arjun's well-being comes first. Always." She opened her drawer and took out a recent photograph of their son. "Would you like to see more pictures of him?" As Raj took the photograph with trembling hands, a knock on the door startled them both. The principal's voice called out, "Priya ma'am, your next parent is waiting." Reality crashed back in. They were still in a school, during parent-teacher meetings. Raj quickly wiped his eyes, composing himself. "Can we meet later?" "Properly?" he asked, reluctantly returning the photograph. Priya nodded. "Come to Sunset Park near the school tomorrow evening. Arjun and I are usually there around 5. You can observe from a distance first. See him play." She wrote down her phone number on a piece of paper. "But remember, we do this on his terms, at his pace." As Raj walked to the door, he turned back one last time. "Thank you," he said simply, but his eyes conveyed much more. Priya watched him leave, her heart a mixture of anxiety and hope. Through the window, she saw him stop at the playground, watching the children play with an expression that spoke of lost time and new beginnings. That evening, as she held Arjun close, watching him drift off to sleep, Priya wondered about the path ahead. Life had brought them full circle, but they were different people now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new possibilities. But for now, in the quiet of her apartment, with Mumbai's lights twinkling outside and Arjun's peaceful breathing filling the room, she felt at peace with her decisions. The evening air at Sunset Park was filled with children's laughter and the gentle rustling of leaves. Priya sat on her usual bench, watching Arjun play in the small sandbox with his favorite red toy truck. She had arrived early, her nerves making her restless at home. Anjali auntie had sensed her anxiety and offered to come along, but Priya knew this was something she needed to face alone. At exactly 5 p.m., she noticed a familiar figure at the park entrance. Raj had traded his business suit for casual clothes, a simple blue shirt and jeans, making him look more like the man she had known during those candlelit conversations long ago. He stood quietly at a distance, following her instructions to observe first, his eyes fixed on the little boy in the sandbox. Arjun was wearing the yellow t-shirt with a cartoon elephant that his daycare teachers loved, his dark curls catching the evening light. As if sensing someone watching him, he looked up and gave one of his heart-melting smiles to no one in particular. Priya heard Raja's sharp intake of breath even from where she sat. It was the smile he had just discovered they shared. After about 15 minutes, Priya gestured for Raj to come closer. He approached slowly, like someone trying not to startle a deer. When he reached the bench, she noticed his hands were trembling slightly. "He loves playing with that truck," she said softly. "One of my students gave it to him on his half-birthday celebration at school." "Half-birthday?" Raj asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The school celebrates half-birthdays for all children under 1 year. It's their way of marking every milestone." Priya smiled at the memory. The entire junior section sang for him. He was more interested in the balloons than the cake, though. As they talked quietly, Arjun continued playing, occasionally looking up at his mother with happy gurgles. Each time he did, Raj's face would soften, years of corporate hardness melting away. "He seems so content," he observed. "So secure." "Children are resilient," Priya replied. "They flourish when they're surrounded by love and stability." The words carried a gentle reminder of what mattered most. A cool breeze rustled through the park, making Arjun shiver slightly. Without thinking, Raj started to move toward him, but Priya's hand on his arm stopped him. "Not yet," she said firmly. "He needs to get used to seeing you here first. Children can sense tension and uncertainty." Raj nodded, understanding. He sat back down, his eyes never leaving his son. "I've been thinking about everything," he said after a while. "About what kind of role I want in his life, what kind of person I want to be for him." He pulled out his phone and showed Priya some photos. "I've been converting the guest house at my weekend property into a children's library. It's near here, in Thane." Priya looked at the photos: walls painted with story characters, small reading nooks with cushions, low shelves filled with colorful books. "The foundation will run it," Raj continued. "But I wanted you to know that I'm thinking long-term. About creating spaces where Arjun could feel comfortable, where other children could benefit too." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Arjun began showing signs of tiredness. Priya went to pick him up, and for the first time, he was close enough for Raj to see the details of his face, the shape of his eyes, the curve of his cheeks, the tiny dimple that appeared when he yawned. "He needs his dinner and sleep soon," Priya said, gathering their things. She hesitated for a moment, then added, "We come here every evening, weather permitting. Same time." The invitation was clear but careful. Raj nodded, understanding the boundaries being set. As they prepared to leave, a young mother from Arjun's daycare approached them. "Oh, is this Arjun's father?" she asked innocently. "He has your smile, sir." The moment froze, heavy with unspoken complications. But before either could respond, Arjun let out a big yawn, making everyone laugh and breaking the tension. Priya handled the situation gracefully, neither confirming nor denying, steering the conversation to the upcoming daycare event instead. Walking home, Priya felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Seeing Raj with Arjun had been both harder and easier than she had expected. The man who had once dismissed them so coldly had been replaced by someone who watched his son play with tears in his eyes. That night, after putting Arjun to bed, Priya found a message on her phone. It was from Raj, a simple thank you, followed by a link to an article about child development and the importance of consistent routines. She smiled despite herself. He was doing his homework. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Raj sat in his home office, but instead of reviewing contracts, he was looking at parenting websites. The wall of business awards seemed less impressive now, overshadowed by a single photo of a little boy playing in a sandbox. He had already called his secretary to clear his evening schedule for the next month. Board meetings would have to move to morning slots. The next day at school, Priya's students noticed she seemed more contemplative than usual. During her financial literacy class, when discussing long-term investments, she found herself talking about how the best investments weren't always financial, sometimes they were investments of time, patience, and understanding. As Mumbai's lights began twinkling in the evening sky, two people in different parts of the city prepared for another meeting at the park. Both knew that the path ahead would be complicated, filled with difficult conversations and careful negotiations. But they also knew that somewhere between past mistakes and future hopes, they had to find a way forward, not for themselves, but for a little boy who deserved all the love both his parents could give. 3 months had passed since that first meeting in the park. Mumbai's seasons had shifted from autumn to winter, bringing with it cool breezes and clear skies. The city had watched silently as a unique story of healing and redemption unfolded in its midst, one careful step at a time. Raj had become a regular presence at Sunset Park, arriving each evening with the same quiet reverence. Over time, Arjun had grown accustomed to the man who sat with his mother, occasionally bringing new toys for the sandbox. The first time Arjun had toddled over to show Raj his truck had been a moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes, including Anjali auntie, who still accompanied them occasionally. The children's library Raj had built was now open, quickly becoming a favorite spot for local families. Priya had helped design educational programs that combined storytelling with basic financial literacy for young children. On weekends, the library buzzed with activity, children sprawled on colorful cushions, parents reading stories, and volunteer teachers conducting workshops. One particularly meaningful evening, as they sat on their usual park bench, Raj shared news that surprised Priya. I'm stepping down as CEO, he said, watching Arjun play with his growing collection of trucks. I'll remain on the board, but the foundation will be my primary focus. Priya studied his face, remembering the man who had once measured everything in profit margins. Are you sure about this? She asked carefully. Your company has been your life's work. Raj smiled, his eyes following Arjun's attempts to build a sandcastle. Life has a way of showing us what really matters, he replied. The foundation's work, especially the education initiatives, it feels more meaningful than building another skyscraper. Their conversation was interrupted by Arjun's excited squeal. He had managed to stack 3 sand buckets, creating what looked vaguely like a tower. Papa, look, he called out naturally, then went back to his creation. Both Raj and Priya froze. It was the first time Arjun had called him that. They had been careful not to push any labels, letting him set the pace. Raj's eyes welled up, but he quickly composed himself, knowing sudden emotional displays might confuse the child. That's wonderful, Beta, he responded softly, using the term of endearment that had become natural over the past months. Priya squeezed his hand briefly, acknowledging the significance of the moment. Later that week, Priya received unexpected news of her own. The school board had been impressed with her financial literacy program, and several other schools had expressed interest in implementing it. They wanted her to head a new department dedicated to expanding the curriculum across multiple branches. When she shared this with Raj during their evening park meeting, his face lit up with genuine pride. You've always been an excellent teacher, he said. Remember how you taught the watchman's children English? Now you're changing the way schools think about financial education. Their conversation was interrupted by Mr. Kapoor, Priya's former employer, who was taking an evening walk in the park. He greeted them warmly, having heard about their story through mutual acquaintances. Mumbai's business circles are full of stories about how Raj Malhotra transformed from a ruthless businessman to a community changemaker, he said with a knowing smile. Now I see the reason why. As Mr. Kapoor walked away, Raj and Priya exchanged glances, remembering how far they had come. The check Raj had offered that rainy evening still lay unopened in Priya's drawer, a reminder of a past they had both grown from. One Sunday morning, Raj invited Priya and Arjun to visit his parents' old house in Pune, which he had maintained but rarely visited. As they walked through the garden where he had spent his childhood, Raj shared stories about his parents, their struggles, their dreams for him, and the values they had tried to instill. I lost sight of those values somewhere along the way, he admitted, watching Arjun chase butterflies in the garden. Success became about numbers in a bank account rather than the difference we make in people's lives. Priya understood the unspoken words. Your parents would be proud of who you're becoming, she said gently. Not because of the buildings you've built, but because you found the courage to rebuild yourself. As winter began giving way to spring, their unusual family unit had found its rhythm. They never moved in together or forced a conventional family structure. Both understood that some bridges, once broken, need to be rebuilt differently. Instead, they created their own version of family, centered around Arjun's well-being and their shared commitment to making a difference in their community. The children's library had expanded to include a center for single mothers, offering vocational training and childcare support. Priya's financial literacy program was being adopted by schools across Mumbai, and Raj's foundation had started scholarship programs for children from underprivileged backgrounds. One evening, as they sat in the park watching Arjun play with his friends, a young mother approached them. She was a beneficiary of their foundation's programs, now studying to become a teacher herself. You both have created something beautiful, she said, gesturing to the library visible from the park. Not just for your son, but for so many children and mothers. As she walked away, Raj and Priya looked at each other, understanding the truth in her words. Their story had never been just about them, or even just about Arjun. It had become about transformation, personal and communal, individual and collective. Arjun, now growing into a toddler who charmed everyone with his mix of Priya's compassion and Raj's determination, had become the bridge between two worlds. Through him, they had learned that sometimes life's biggest mistakes can lead to its most meaningful revelations. As the sun set over Mumbai, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Arjun ran to them with a handful of flowers he had picked. "For you," he said, giving one to each parent with the innocent wisdom that only children possess. In that moment, surrounded by the sounds of children playing, the distant hum of the city, and the gentle evening breeze, both Raj and Priya realized that their story had found its own kind of happiness. Not the kind found in fairy tales or romantic movies, but something more real and lasting, the joy of growth, forgiveness, and the chance to make right what once went wrong. The park began emptying as evening deepened, but they lingered a while longer, watching their son play in the gathering dusk. Their journey had been unconventional, their happiness hard-earned, but in the end, they had built something beautiful, not just for themselves, but for their community. And in doing so, they had written their own definition of what makes a family, what constitutes success, and how love, in all its forms, can transform not just hearts, but entire lives.